I've been a sleepwalker for as long as I can remember. It started when I was about 12 or 13, just after my parents' divorce. I'd wake up in strange places, sometimes on the living room couch, other times in the kitchen, holding a spoon like I was about to eat something. It was weird but harmless. My mom used to say it was just stress, and that I'd grow out of it. But I never did. Over the years, it became part of my life. At college, my roommates would laugh about finding me standing in the hallway or, once, even outside our dorm, barefoot and confused. I'd brush it off, too. What could I do? It wasn't like I could control it. That all changed about 6 months ago, though. That's when the sleepwalking stopped being a harmless quirk. That's when I started seeing it. The shadow. It was late one night in mid-October. I remember it was unusually cold for the season. I live alone, which never really bothered me before. My place is in the middle of a quiet suburb, nothing too fancy, just a small 2-story house I bought after I started working remotely. Life was normal, boring, even, until that night. I woke up in the hallway, as usual, groggy and a little confused. It wasn't surprising. I figured I'd been sleepwalking again. But something felt off. The air was colder than usual, and the house was eerily quiet. That's when I noticed it. At the end of the hallway, near the stairs, there was a figure. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light. My brain was foggy, still waking up, and I assumed my eyes were playing tricks on me. But as I squinted into the darkness, I could make out its shape. It wasn't moving. It just stood there, still as a statue, staring straight at me. I froze. My heart started pounding, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I wanted to move, to run, but I was rooted in place, terrified. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, and when I looked again, the figure was gone. Just like that. I told myself it was nothing. I'd probably been half asleep, still in that weird state between dreams and waking. Maybe I'd imagined it, or maybe it was just my brain processing a leftover dream. But the fear, that sinking, ice-cold feeling in my gut, lingered. Over the next few days, I tried to forget about it. I chalked it up to stress. Maybe I'd been overworking myself. But then it happened again. A week later, I woke up in the same spot, and there it was, standing at the end of the hallway. Only this time, it was closer. I could see it more clearly now, a tall, human-like figure, but there were no features. Just a silhouette. A shadow. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. I just watched. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every night the same thing. I'd wake up in random parts of the house, and the shadow would be there. In the living room, near the kitchen, by the front door. Each time, it got closer. It never touched me, but its presence was suffocating, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I didn't tell anyone at first. Who would believe me? It sounded insane, even to me. So, I kept quiet, trying to convince myself that it was all in my head. Maybe it was just a weird side effect of sleepwalking, a vivid hallucination brought on by stress or exhaustion. But deep down, I knew it was something more. One night, things escalated. I woke up standing outside, in my backyard. The grass was cold and damp beneath my bare feet, and I could see my breath in the chilly air. I was standing by the tree line, facing the woods. And there, just inside the shadows of the trees, I saw it. The figure. It was barely visible, blending into the darkness, but I knew it was watching me. Panic surged through me, and I bolted back inside, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, sitting in the living room with all the lights on, staring at the door, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. That was the turning point. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever was happening wasn't normal. This wasn't just sleepwalking. It was something else, something far more terrifying. I needed answers. I started researching sleep disorders, hoping to find some kind of explanation. Sleepwalking was common enough, but seeing things while sleepwalking? That was different. I stumbled upon articles about parasomnia, a rare sleep disorder where people experience vivid hallucinations during episodes of sleepwalking. It seemed like a plausible explanation, until I saw it during the day. It was a Saturday afternoon, broad daylight. I was in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when I saw it out of the corner of my eye. The shadow. It was standing in the doorway, just watching. I dropped my phone, my heart hammering in my chest. This couldn't be real. I wasn't asleep. I was awake. Fully awake. But there it was, as clear as day. I blinked, and it was gone. That's when I started to lose it. I couldn't trust my own eyes anymore. The shadow was everywhere, always at the edge of my vision, always watching. At first, it only appeared in the house, but soon it started following me outside. I'd see it in the rearview mirror while driving, standing on the sidewalk as I passed by, or even reflected in store windows when I went out. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd feel it standing over me, waiting, watching. I tried sleeping with the lights on, but it didn't help. The shadow didn't care about the light. It was always there, lurking in the background. One night, I decided to set up cameras around the house. I needed to know if it was real, if I wasn't just losing my mind. I placed cameras in the hallway, the living room, and my bedroom, anywhere the shadow had appeared. I stayed up that night, watching the feeds from my laptop, but nothing happened. No shadow, no strange movements. Just silence. After hours of staring at the screen, exhaustion finally took over, and I dozed off in the chair. When I woke up, it was early morning. I groggily checked the footage, half expecting to find nothing. But what I saw sent a chill down my spine. In the footage from my bedroom, there it was, the shadow. It stood in the corner, watching me as I slept. But that wasn't the worst part. As I slept, the shadow moved. Slowly, it crept closer to the bed, until it was standing right over me. I watched in horror as it reached out, its hand hovering just above my face before pulling back. Then it disappeared, fading into the darkness. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I replayed the footage, hoping I'd imagined it. But there it was. The proof. The shadow was real. And it was getting closer. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stay in the house, but I couldn't leave either. The shadow followed me everywhere. I was trapped, and it was only a matter of time before it did something worse. In desperation, I reached out to a sleep specialist. I didn't tell him about the shadow, just the sleepwalking. He suggested I keep a sleep journal and try medication, but none of it helped. The shadow wasn't something medicine could fix. I started researching paranormal phenomena, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain what was happening. That's when I stumbled upon stories about shadow people. Thousands of people had reported seeing dark, human-like figures watching them at night. Some said the shadows were harmless. Others claimed they were evil entities that fed on fear. One story, in particular, caught my attention. It was about a man who had been haunted by a shadow figure for years. At first, they just watched, but over time, it became more aggressive. He claimed it would whisper to him in his sleep, urging him to do terrible things. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. He ended his own life, leaving a note behind that simply read, "It wouldn't leave me alone." I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. Was that where I was headed? Would the shadow eventually drive me to madness, or worse? I didn't want to find out. The next night, I decided to confront it. I stayed awake, waiting for the shadow to appear. I didn't have a plan. What could I do? But I couldn't keep living in fear. Around 3 a.m., it showed up. I was in the living room, sitting on the couch, when I saw it in the hallway. The shadow stood there, just as it always did, but this time, I didn't look away. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest, and walked toward it. "Who are you?" I demanded. My voice shook, but I didn't care. "What do you want?" The shadow didn't respond. It just stood there, motionless. But as I got closer, something strange happened. The air around me grew colder, and I felt pressure in my chest like the weight of the world was pressing down on me. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred, and for a moment I thought I was going to pass out. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pressure lifted. The shadow was gone. I stood there, gasping for breath, my heart racing. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know if I scared it away or if it simply decided to leave on its own. But since then, I haven't seen the shadow. I'd like to believe it's gone for good, but part of me knows better. It's still out there somewhere waiting, watching. And one day, it'll come back.